Hi, it's Bruce here, and owner and chief, only author right now of the Skeptical Guitarist publications books, and I wanted to talk about the first books I wrote, which were the music principles for the Skeptical Guitarist. Here's the volume 1, music principles. I start off with, in this first approach, I start off with a very general discussion about just chords. Let's not get too technical yet, just the chords that belong to different keys and chord families. So, for example, I think I start off with the key of G, and G is the 1 chord. 1, 2, 3, 4, G, A, B, C is the 4, and D is the 5. 1, 4, 5, those are the most important chords, and they're all major chords in any key. And so in this first approach, what I call in the book, I just try to run through and give you some experience playing the 1, 4, 5 chords in the most important keys we have, which are in the word caged, C-A-G-E-D. Okay, so to not get any more technical than that, in the next part of the book we will get into the details, but for now it's just 1, 4, 5s, and then we'll come back and fill in the minor chords, which are 2, 3, and 6. So, for example, in the key of C, 1, 4, 5s are C, D, E, F, and G. And in the key of D, it's D, D, E, F, G, and A. So we're going to run through that approach in the first section, add the minor chords, and then at a certain, let's see, about page 33, starts bunches of useful chords. These are chords that you're going to run into. It's kind of a chord dictionary. It's about 8 pages. Rather than an entire thick 200-page book of chords, these are the most important ones that you're going to run into. After getting that, now comes the second approach, which we go back to the chromatic scale. This is back to the beginning. The chromatic scale just means every note that there is. And the point here is to take that raw material, learn how to derive the major scale. There are 12 chromatic notes, there are 12 notes, and so therefore there are 12 chromatic scales, one for each of those notes, and each of those chromatic scales you derive a major scale from. Okay, so we go through that process with the most important keys first, the caged. The interesting thing here is that as you start from C, which is the key that has no flats, no sharps, and you start adding fifths, going up by 5, so C, D, E, F, G is the 5th above C. As you start doing this, you generate a sequence of keys. So the key of C has no flats, no sharps. The key of G has 1 sharp, it's up a 5th. Go up another 5th to the key of D, 2 sharps. Another 5th to the key of A, 3 sharps. And the music is arranged like this. And the way to keep track of this particular sequence is to think of, can't girls do anything else but flirt? That will bring you up through the most important keys for the guitar, which are the keys that have sharps rather than flats. Or can't guys do anything else but flirt, if you're of that persuasion. So that's the layout of the scales. What do we do with that? The next thing is to take each chord grouping, each chord family, take the scale, and I do it with the key of C, take the scale, lay it out, and generate the chords, the triads, the 1, 3, 5, from each of the notes in the scale. So I'll go to the C note, that's the first note of the scale. I'll go 1, 3, 5, that's C, E, G. I'll go to the D, which is number 2 in the scale degree number 2. D, I'll go a triad from there, D, F, A. You go to the 3rd degree, that's E, E, G, B. You generate all these chords in the key, and turns out that the 1, the 4, and the 5 are major, and the 2, 3, and 6 are minor. You can see that that works. You can hear that it works. At this point, taking all these chord families together, you can lay them out in the circle of fifths. Let me show you a diagram of that. And it looks pretty useless, mysterious if nothing else. But the nice thing about this is that with these, can't girls do anything else but flirt, with those keys laid out, you can see the chord families. Each little wedge of the pie will contain, like in the key of C, the 1, the 4, and the 5, and then the 3 minor chords that fit in as the 2, 3, and 6 are right in there. So you can see the key of C that way, shift and overlap 1 notch in the clockwise direction, and you have the key of G, and you have the key of D. It's a really nice diagram you can check to see where you are. Now, why this is also important is because music, chord progressions, particularly I would say in the jazzier kinds of music, progress according to the circle of fifths. In other words, you'll have many progressions of chords where the root notes progress according to this model. Now, the thing that happens though, it goes backwards. We just generated the keys, and you'll see how it's done. We generated it going forward. C has no sharps, G has 1 sharp, D has 2 sharps, etc. When you actually apply this information, you go backwards. Music tends to want to go downward by a fifth. So whatever key, whatever chord, and whatever key I'm in, whatever chord I'm on, if there's a natural progression for that chord to go somewhere, it's probably down a fifth. And down means counterclockwise. Now, in that case, what's the useful memory aid is the reverse of the can't girls do anything else but flirt. It's fling, this is an F sharp, fling Bruce Emery's amplifier down the Grand Canyon. That's the useful information here that you can take, and you take little pieces of it that'll work in certain parts of songs. And also realize the word bead, B-E-A-D, is there. That's a nice, you can also think of that. So this really just sort of lays out the whole world of music to you here, with the little chord families, and then this progression around the circle. The flat keys are on the left side. And it all works the same way. And you get experience generating. I have worksheets in here, which I think are useful. It really helps to go through and write these things out. If you've actually put pen to paper, then you can convince yourself, yeah, I see why there's an F sharp there, and the next key there's a C sharp as well. Really good experience. This book then runs into the minor keys. I think that's pretty much where it leaves off. So, volume 1 is all about notes, keys, chord families, circle of fifths. And so this information really applies to any musical instrument. It's valid for any musical instrument. Volume 2, this one, really only, well, not only, but works primarily for guitar players. In volume 2, we're going to start, in other words, where do you find the chords and the scales around the neck of the guitar? In volume 2, we start off with the concept of chord voicings, like we talked about, triads. This is mostly about, this first part is about triads with the 1, 3, 5. So if I'm in the key of C, I have the scale would be C, D, E, F, G, or the numbers would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the triad is the 1, the 3, and the 5. So we get the 1, 3, and the 5. But this 1, 3, 5 doesn't always have to exist in that order. You can have inversions. So in other words, I could start this one and this would still be a C chord, start on the 3rd, which is the E, and go 3, 5, 8, which is really 1 again. So that's another voicing of the C chord. And indeed, if I want to start on the G note, I can find the G, the C, and the E, which is the 5, the 1, and the 3, another inversion of the C chord. Plus, if you, for example, if you just play a C chord shape and you play all 6 strings, well, the note of the bass there is not a C note, it's an E note, which means it's the first inversion of the C chord, if you want to get technical and label it. If I put the G in the bass, again, it's not the root, it's the second inversion of the C chords, the G in the bass, the fifth in the bass. Now where this gets interesting is, in the book I take you through the 5 chord shapes, C, G, D, A, and E, and compare their voicings. So for example, that was C, and so it has a, if you want to start at the 5th string, you have a 1, 3, 5, and an octave. Well, interestingly, if you take a G chord, the full G chord, you also have a 1, 3, 5, and an octave, starting on the 6th string. So those 2 chords, their voicings, their internal voicings, are kind of alike. And you do the same kinds of things to them. The other 3 chords, the E, A, and the D, those are in a different group. They, for example, the E chord has the root. The next note is not the 3rd, it's the 5th. It goes right to the 5th. And then another root. Where's the 3rd? Well, it shows up on the 3rd string. So the 3rd comes higher in this chord shape. And this chord is analogous to the A. Again, if you start on the 5th string, you have a 1, you have a root, a 5th, and a root, finally a 3rd. And that's also the case if you shift over again to the D chord, you have a root, and a 5th, and a root, and then a 3rd. So the E, A, and D kind of work together, and the G and C kind of are like. You can use them identically, the same way, except that, noticing like the D chord, you have the opportunity for this low, it's a 3rd, this is the 1st inversion, it's an F sharp. It's a nice sound. You could only get that sound with the D shape. Wherever you go on the neck with it, you could go, I can't play it, but I mean, if you went up the neck, if you put a capo on up the neck, you could find that group, but that's the shape, but the chord here is a D. This chord would be an E, this would be an F, this would be a G, etc. So the chord name changes while the shape can stay the same. Now, a little more clear about that, if you take the E shape, this is the chord that most people know. The E shape, if I put a bar underneath that shape, move it to the 1st fret, it's an F chord, but it's an E shape. And if I go to the 2nd fret, it's an E shape still, but it's F sharp and G. So as you begin moving up the neck, you got to keep track of 2 things. What is the chord, and what is the chord shape? And I'll still misspeak. I'll still use the wrong, I don't, just out of laziness or something, I'll just call it the wrong thing, the G chord, G shape. Okay. Now, where this really gets interesting, I think, is that, and this gets back to the caged memory aid, the C chord, I can find various forms of the C chord all around the neck, okay? Starting off with the C shape of the C chord. Okay, now take the word caged. Okay, C, A is next. All right, overlapping here at the 3rd fret, that C note, the root note, I can put a bar there, and then I can put what looks like an A chord. Now, I probably wouldn't finger it this way. I'd probably finger it like this, because this is hard, But it looks like an A chord, doesn't it? But an A, so if I start with the A chord and go A, and then alphabetically I got an A sharp, and I got a B, and then I got a C chord. So you can hear that this chord and this chord, they're the same, but they have a different voicing, different order of notes. One thing I can point out, with the C chord down here, you've got a 3rd, you have a low 3rd, 1, 3, 5. But with the A-shaped C chord, I said it right, there's no low 3rd. The 3rd comes here. Different sound, whole different use for that chord. So we have the C shape of the C chord, if I can say these right, the A shape of the C chord. Next, in the word caged, the G comes. All right, well, at that bar with the 3rd finger, I put a bar there with my 1st finger, and then make, and it's not easy to do because it's a stretch, but a G shape. But guess what? It's a C chord. You can hear it. C-shaped C chord, A-shaped C chord, G-shaped C chord. And this G-shaped C chord, if you listen to the bottom of it, well, that sounds just like the overlapping tier of strings down the neck on the C shape. I think that's really cool. Well, what's next? C, A, G, E. Oh, here comes the E shape. This is E. So we have, this like saying E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, B. So finally we get C at the 8th fret. and it's got that sort of power chord in the bass, the root, the fifth, the root, and then finally a third. And then we have one left, that's the D, caged. So again, overlapping with that lower shape. And I can get, remember before I was saying about that third in the bass. That's, I wouldn't, obviously I would never play this chord this way, but all those notes are there. I might want to play this chord this way. Or just take this much of it. Or just, I don't know. That's my raw material at that fret for a C chord with a D shape. I think I said it right. So that's pretty cool. That's bringing you right up the neck. I'll go through and add other scale degrees to the chord. So you have a second and a fourth and a sixth and a seventh. Those are complex chords. You see how to use those. Then come the extended chords, which are the 7, 9, 11, and 13. It sounds complicated. It's not. I explain it all, why those chords have those names. I give you lots of examples, lots of chord progressions. And at the end of the book, there's a discussion of how to use thirds and sixths and tenths, which are intervals which are nice to be thrown around in leads and, you know, solo fingerstyle stuff. Okay, so that's the second book. Just quickly, I want to tell you about the third book, the jazz book. This is kind of the next logical step if you're interested in jazz guitar. It's more of an emphasis on chords, and specifically, not specifically, but a lot of this has to do with this one particular form of chording. If you start with a C chord, make it major seventh, that gives it that jazzy feel. These are quadrads now. You know, whenever you have a triad plus the next, so 1, 3, 5, 7. 1, 3, 5, 7. And as a general framework, I want to work with the rhythm changes, which are the 1, 6, 2, 5. The 1, the 6 minor, in this case would be A minor 7. The 2 would be D minor 7, and the 5 would be G7. Well, and this is all very nice, and you can modify these chord shapes. You can have a C major 9, which is this. You can have an A minor 7 with that kind of voicing. The G7s, oh gee, you can have all kinds of, you know, additions to make them 9s, 11s, and 13s. All that's described. But this is a position that basically exists low in the neck. You have to stay with the open strings. We need a shape or a group of chords for that 1, 6, 2, 5 that we can put anywhere in the neck. And so I take you through, you know, running up to the different chord shapes, like C. The C major 7 is there, you know, and then the D minor 7 and all that. But what I eventually get to is the 8th fret, and this, you can hear this. Here's the C major 7 down here. You can hear this. Same chord, slightly different arrangement of notes inside of it. But now we come to what I call the MVP, which is the most valuable progression. And it'll start with this. This is actually it's the E shape of the C major 7 chord. Okay, because all the root notes are in position to, you know, justify calling it that. That's the 1 chord. The 6 minor chord will be this. It's actually a C major 6, but it can be substituted for the 6 minor, which is the A minor. Okay, so there's the 1, 6 minor, and then the 2 minor, and then the 5, 7. Now, instead of staying up here way at the neck where it's just, you know, kind of messy, let's take this whole thing down to the 3rd fret, and we'll have the G major 7. And starting on, let's see, page 24, I run through various ways to manipulate these chords, and you get some interesting sounds. I'll just give you a few of them. The basic progression is the 1, the 6, the 2, and the 5. Okay. Now, changes. Starts off, mostly these changes will occur in the last couple of chords. So we have the G major 7, major 6, the minor 7, and this is instead of 7th, it's a 9th chord. little jazzier, a little more uptown. And I'll, explain how these are all derived later on in the book. Another example, back to the 1, the G major 7, major 6, the 2, and then instead of changing to this root note, stick with the 6th string root note. It's really an A minor 6, but it's still, it takes the place in this case of the D9, which has taken the place of the D7. These are all just different versions of the same kind of chord, and you'll hear all these used. I like a couple of these others. You start off the same each time. You've got the same A minor 7. Now listen to this one. And then to the G major 7. What's happening here is a thing called voice leading, where if you imagine a choir with the alto, tenor, bass, soprano, you've got, in the bass, you've got this note leading to this note, half step lower, 1 note lower, and then eventually resolving to this note. That's kind of a bass line. It's called voice leading, when you bring a line down either chromatically or, in the regular major scale. Nice stuff. Another possibility, you have the same beginning. Now, this will be, well, this is the A minor 7, this is an A minor 11. It's the 11th note up from the root of this chord. And then look at this. So you have this, which is the flats, a flat 5 note, flatted 5th, and then back to the 1. This is one of my favorite jazz progressions. I love how this note stays the same. Actually, these two are both staying the same. And then there's a slight change. This note is the same all the way through, and then this note resolves down 1. It's just beautiful. It's like a choir singing. So, that's probably enough of that. I'm going to go through all different kinds of chords. There's the diminished chords and the augmented chords and the flat 5 and flat 9 and all of those. And eventually give you some jazz standards as examples of how to use them. And then in the back of the book, at the end, comes the modes. Now we're talking about playing individual notes, improvising, jazz lines, and a discussion of what all that, there's a lot of confusion of what the modes are and how they can be used. And I think this lays it out pretty well so you can see just what's going on. So that is pretty much a roundup of my music principles books. Yeah, and I think that's enough to give you a little head start, look ahead. Thank you very much.